evening, everyone, and happy Earth Day. Thank you so much for coming. My name is Catherine. I'm a research librarian here at the Mount Prospect Public Library. I want to welcome you to today's program on rain gardens. I want to welcome our presenter for tonight's program, Heather Prince. Heather is a trained horticulturist specializing in shrubs, trees, and natives. She has been in the industry for over 25 years and has taught many classes at botanic gardens, the Morton Arboretum, garden clubs, garden centers, all those fun places. And she's here tonight to talk to us about rain gardens. So thank you so much, Heather, for being here. Thank you all for coming, and I will now turn over to you.
Good evening. Thank you, everybody, for coming. It's lovely to see all these faces. Do not be shy. The front row is the best spot in the house. And welcome, because I think we've all had enough rain that we know where our wet spots are, don't we? Right. So a couple of notes on the handout. There's a lot of information on the handout. There's a front side and a back side. And the backside is a plant list. We are not covering every single plant because we only have an hour. So we're going to just do a bit of a highlight reel on the plants. And as Catherine said, if you have a question, raise your hand. If you have a detailed question, maybe hang on to it till the end so we can make sure that you get everything that you need. So with that, we're going to jump in with some definitions. What is a rain garden, right? So I have all these beautiful screens. It's really lovely. But the laser pointer only works on this one. So a rain garden can be something pretty simple and straightforward, like a depression or a low area where water is going to collect during a storm event. And it can be something that's already there or something that's like that we build for ourselves. It's usually planted in a variety of appropriate plants. And I say that appropriate because we want plants that are going to be really durable and a bit flexible in their water requirements. And their goal is to kind of slow and hold that water in place and keep it on property or slow it down before it gets to the municipal system. And so a lot of the plants that are on that plant list are also, they do a lot of jobs. And one of those is, some of those are going to be able to filter and hold pollutants. So all that stuff that kind of flows off the driveway or flows off your roof. And so that helps improve our water quality overall. Because we are in the Great Lakes and everything sort of heads south to the Mississippi. And so just to give us some pictures, fresh rain for this guy. And so we have a dry stone creek that feeds into this rain garden. And there's going to be a lot of examples as we go because rain gardens can look like a lot of different things. There isn't really necessarily one single way to do this. And so for these folks, they said, you know what, we're going to, whoops, I have many buttons. Sorry about that. So, this one in the center, this is papyrus. This is an annual for us, but papyrus loves wet feet. It's a pond plant. So why not give yourself something a little ancient, a little touch of ancient Egypt? What the heck? So, sometimes we can be a little bit more perhaps contemporary or elegant. And in this case, our drainage is that rock in the center and it's headed this direction where that canna lily is. And even though canna is a kind of an annual for us, they really love to be in water. So we're kind of pulling that water across, and we've given ourselves some elegant stepping stones as well as an interesting mix of different colors and textures. And so why do we want a rain garden? What is the point other than I'm tired of the swampy corner? So a lot of cases it's keeping stormwater on our property. And depending, because I know folks are from probably not all from Mount Prospect, but if you're going to build a rain garden, do check with your village ordinances. And also because many villages and cities and towns now will offer rebates or have some interesting programs in place to help you build a rain garden. So I'm coming from Downers Grove, and Downers Grove has a utility credit if you build a rain garden or put in permeable paving. So, But as far as other benefits, besides for just us, they, again, hold that polluted water, but it creates another garden space, right? So it gives you something interesting in the yard, and it attracts all these wonderful wildlife, from butterflies and birds and frogs and toads, and you get big dragonflies, and you know, dragonflies I adore because they eat mosquitoes. And so do frogs and toads and birds. Anything that eats a mosquito, I'm a huge fan, because mosquitoes will find me from miles away. So some illustrations, right, because we're all visual critters. And so for these folks, there is a little bit of engineering sometimes in this. And so I've given you guys some links on the handout as well, and we'll get to that. But so all of this, heck darn. Again, all the buttons are very close together on this remote. So we're getting water that's coming off the roof, through the downspout, off the lawn, off the driveway, and there have put a rain garden right here before it hits the street. And so all of those things that our cars track in, and you know, that asphalt might release, is headed into this lovely little garden here out front. And so before it hits that storm drain, just to some installation basics, and there's some links on that handout to other resources that are much more detailed. But if we're gonna build a rain garden, sometimes it makes sense to choose a natural depression where the water tends to go anyway, because there's a certain point where it's exhausting. You got to stop fighting it, right? Sometimes we are like, nope, you know, I want that garden right front and center out my window where I can see it and enjoy it. And so there are some things kind of basic things to consider is if you're going to extend a downspout, make sure you're putting it at least 10 feet out from the house, because the goal is to move the water away from the house, not the water back into the house. I have a 1929 Sears kit house that has only been waterproofed for 2 years. It's still very exciting. Yeah, we won't get into the basement stories, but we want the water away from the structure. We can't put it directly over a septic system because that's its own beast with its own requirements. And if you can, if possible, just keep in mind that digging in tree roots is problematic for you because it's hard, and it's problematic for the tree because a lot of tree species don't like their roots messed with, especially oaks and beeches resent having root disturbance. I do say, I know I say in the slide, plan on 1 inch of rainfall. I feel like I may need to revise this to like 2 to 3 inches and a tornado. So I found I don't want to be the leader in tornadoes this year, and here we are. So just another illustration, and it also, when you're digging these things, I kind of think of it like holding out your hand like a little cup. We're not digging to Australia. We're just going down about maybe 8 inches, because it doesn't take much for water to move. Question?
There's a lot of clay in my soil. Do I need to go a little lower?
So for a clay soil, there's a lot of clay in your soil. Would you need to go a little lower? I'm repeating for our folks out there. So would you need to go a little lower? You might need to go a little bit deeper, and you might need to do some gravel in the base of it and kind of create a little bit of a reservoir. And so we'll get a little bit into that, but that starts getting into the nitty gritty because when it comes to gravel, you want to do a graduated size of gravel, because water only pays attention to physics and not what we want it to do. So we want to make sure that water percolates down all the way, because if you create too much of a different interface, so if you go soil on top of big gravel, water will sit where that differential is and just very slowly move down, because that water tension likes to hold it all together. Make sense? Yep. Okay, cool. Yeah, so for these, like for this illustration, I think there's, you may have to do a gravel at the base, depending on what kind of soils that you have. And so, and these folks are, I'm going to get this right. Ha. So these folks have pulled that downspout out a bit, and they've just created a shallow little cup. And this poor lady's getting the downpour. So they're kind of pulling all of the water that's coming off the roof. And so in this one, kind of the same idea, but this is where, again, maybe check those ordinances, because in this case, these folks did an overflow into the street, and that's where you have to double check, because some villages might require that if you're going out doing this in the front yard. And so everybody's ordinances are ever so slightly different. And so as you can kind of see on this one, they used perhaps a bit more of a gravel base in the bottom of it. But again, it's only 8 inches deep. We're not going super deep. Let's kind of think of shallow bowl. And it can be almost any shape. You can make it square, you can make it round, you can make it kidney shaped, teardrop, whichever. So when we're thinking about rain gardens, we kind of also need to think about, so where's this water coming from? And this is where we start to have to apply some math. Because if we're looking at, so for example, for my rain garden at home, it holds a quarter of my roof volume, because it's off the one downspout. I have a small house, it's easy to figure this out. But, and then I didn't necessarily realize, it gets a little bit of off the driveway as well, just because our driveways tend to be pitched so water flows off of them. And so with the basement waterproofing, we got to add a sump pump. So I have a water feature, it's called a sump pump. And so I'm also very spoiled with free draining soils. So, and sometimes that rain garden might be at the edge of a culvert or a drain. If some of our subdivisions will have those, drain kind of things in the corner of the yard, and everything's pitched that direction. And so checking on your HOA rules too, but sometimes we can do a garden around that drain, and that slows that water down, and then we get flowers, which is nice, right? So some things to think about is the square footage of the area that's draining into this garden. And then also, if you've got a sump pump or you've got a situation where you've got a swale or a culvert, is at least some idea of the velocity of that water. And so we did a little tiny little dry creek for ours, and I'm finding out how much that sump pump can push pond cobble. Much to the delight of the robin population, but hey. So when we're looking at handy guides, the Wisconsin DNRs is kind of the Bible of rain garden building. It goes into the detail and the nitty gritty and gives you formulas and all kinds of good stuff. University of Illinois Extension has a bunch of resources. Check your municipal website, Downers Grove does. There's a few others out there too. So there's definitely more information out there when you start getting out the measuring tape and having a think about what you want to do with it. But I find this is kind of my favorite way to illustrate this is 3 zones. So, because this is a garden that's going to dry out. We're here in the Chicago area. We have July and August, so Midwestern August, right? So there may be a situation where you have to water the things in the bottom of that rain garden every once in a while. But I find that 3 zones is a pretty good way to think about it, because let's face it, we think in threes. 3 seems fairly comfortable. And so that bottom of the rain garden is our wettest zone. It can be, depending on what's feeding that rain garden, it can be really mucky, or it can be kind of just dampish. Zone 2, that middle zone, is plants that can go from wet to dry. They can handle being inundated for a day or 2, but they can also be just fine in regular old garden soil. And then zone 3 is kind of our grade level, where things are going to be a little bit drier. If we get, who are we kidding? We know we're going to get those big, huge rains. where that rain garden may get all the way up to the top. So those plants can be able to handle maybe a little bit extra water every once in a while. So this is kind of another, just an illustration, just to give you an idea of visuals of that kind of wet, moderate, and dry. And so kind of that, I also like the fact that you've got that little inlet is right there. So, and then once we kind of understand, because we can do a rain garden in the sun, we can do one in the shade, as long as we, and there's plants that are gonna thrive in all of this. We tend to plant mostly native plants, but we certainly there's certainly cultivars and other non-native plants that do great. So just some visual illustrations. So this town decided they were sick and tired of mowing the bottom of the damp retention area and said, we're gonna do a garden. So we do have some culvert that's feeding, and the water kind of moves through. But they've decided to keep the plant palette fairly simple, right? That's not 50 kinds of plants, that's about half a dozen. And so, but it gives you a big impact, and the poor public works guy is not trying to mow the mud. So to these folks, and so this one is interesting, because if you're, for me as a horticulturist, I can say, I know where the wet spot is, because this plant, this red flower, this is cardinal flower, that has to be moist all the time to be truly happy. And so they've taken this downspout and it's feeding it right there. And these little pink plants on the edge, this is allium or ornamental onion, and that likes to be high and dry. The best examples are usually in the Jewel parking lot. When we had that really bad drought a few years ago, what's the only plant looking good? And so that says this is where they've dug that rain garden, even though they have all these other different plants in that area. So you can be a bit targeted, and it doesn't have to be you're not digging up half the yard. You can just have a small area, and it does make a difference. So this guy said, I am done mowing the ditch. And so we have some very happy water-loving things in the middle, and some very happy butterflies that hang out in this spot. Here's his poor tractor over there. So, or that's the park district. Either way, it's like we are done. We're going to do something else. But it gives a real soft kind of garden space. And so we're going to get into plants. And this is where you flip over that handout. And we're going to start with a dry, sunny, so this is plants for sun, and this is the top level that's at grade, that can, that's a little bit on the drier side of the spectrum, because I do not expect you to water everything the first year, see how we go the second year. So for a native plant that's very garden friendly, and is still a milkweed. The world milkweed, it's only 18 to 24 inches, so it's down below your knees. It's very delicate in its habit, and it blooms white from about June into September. So it does all the jobs of milkweed by being the larval host for monarchs. And then milkweed also has a whole list of stuff that lives on it, and that's a whole other conversation. But no bug seems to be able to resist the nectar of a milkweed. So I don't have time to show all the photos, but I have sap-eating butterflies that love a milkweed. They're like, it's got to be like high sugar or something. So this is a very sweet little plant. It weaves through the garden very nicely and gives you a delicate texture. GM is our native prairie smoke, is blooming right now. It's an April bloomer. It's pollinated by our big bumblebees that are out and about. And it's so it's a great early nectar source. It's one of our earlier native plants, and it's very short. We're like maybe 6 inches or so, maybe 8 if you squint. And it does these little rosettes. And so the seeds are that smoky, kind of airy, fluffy seed head. And the nice part about prairie smoke is that the foliage is somewhat evergreen, and it turns a beautiful red in the fall. And it's not necessarily easy to see in that picture, it's a little clumper. It's not like ivy or vinca, which is gonna spread. It's gonna do little clumps next to each other. And I've interplanted it with like little crocus just because why not? And so as I have gotten to know this plant, I'm like, nope, I'm gonna be a little clump and I'm just gonna sit here. So not necessarily a spreader, but very sweet. Parthenium is a summer bloomer, so wild quinine. And I like it because it's got a big chunky leaf. And we need to blend our delicate and our chunky because that gives us more visual richness in the garden. It's also a lovely plant for bouquets because it almost takes the place of baby's breath in the vase. However, give it a good, thorough shake and maybe a rinse before you bring it in the house because all of our little tiny pollinators love this plant. And so this is one of those things that we plant for our beneficial wasps. I know everyone tends to cringe at the word wasp, but in our syrphid flies, all our little predators where the adults are nectar insects, but their larvae eat aphids and other things that we don't like in the garden. But again, it's white, it blooms for a long season, and it goes with everything. And the bunnies don't eat it. Oh, hallelujah. So, Pygmanthemum. So we have half a dozen different mountain mints that are native for us. This one is more delicate in its leaf, and I know it is a mint. So if it is on the dry or leaner side of the spectrum of soil, so you've got a drier, leaner, rockier soil, this one might actually spread more. I'm blessed with very rich soil, so mine tends to stay put and kind of flop a little because it's too rich. It's really too rich for it. So that keeps it kind of more little. So it may travel a little bit in a leaner soil, but it is an edible plant. So because you're working hard in the garden and you deserve treats. It's lovely in your iced tea. It doesn't necessarily bake well because I have tried it. So, and of course, being a mint, it's fuzzy and it's fragrant, and the bunnies don't eat it. The deer aren't crazy about it either, so there are some benefits. Probably one of my very favorite native grasses is little bluestem. And this is one where you're more likely to find cultivars in the garden center than the species. Although there's a bunch of native plant sales out there. So if you Google native plants sales Chicago area, there's tons of them. So you can find the species. But with little bluestem, the cultivars are all very upright. So it's a very narrow, upright grass. With the species, its seed dispersal strategy is to be very dramatic and flop over and drop its seed next door. And so, as gardeners, that tends to, it bugs us, right? So we've created things that are more upright. But it's just wonderful, and there's lots of different shades of blue, and then the fall color is maroon and red and caramel and blonde and fabulous. So it is a host plant for some skipper butterflies. It's also a host plant for some grasshoppers, which I think is cool because I'm a bug person. So, but it also means they are bird food. So, this one, Zizia, Golden Alexander's, is actually rather flexible in its water requirements. And so this one is going to bloom any day now because we've been really warm. It tends to bloom April-ish, and it gives you this beautiful sulfur yellow flower. It's also a larval host for black swallowtail caterpillars. And so I spotted my first black swallowtail today. I'm like, where were you? Hanging out all winter. So you might get some fun, big black butterflies. But it's just a soft, yellow, frothy sort of plant. And again, with those little tiny flowers, it gives us lots of different opportunities for different pollinators. Okay, so we're gonna go into that middle level with the fun and funky rattlesnake master. And so it's called yuccafolium because it has leaves like a yucca. And so I like the Sputnik flowers. And they also dry beautifully. And so a lot of our native plants make really awesome dried arrangements because you deserve fun things from the garden. But this one gives a real different texture. And just, it will spread if it's happy, but give it lots of friends and it tends to be better behaved. Eutrochium, spotted Joe Pye weed. We've got a few different species of Joe Pye, but this one is kind of a mid-range of that 4 to 6 feet. So I'm 5'6", so it's as big as me. And it is lavender. And it's big, fluffy lavender late in the season, all the way into September, and it's going to be covered in bees and covered in butterflies. But it will handle water really beautifully for us. So it can go wet to dry. If you're going to do a big rain garden and you want a big statement plant, this can be a good candidate. Our Liatris spicata, marsh blazing star. This is our only water-loving Liatris. All the rest like to be on the drier side. And it's a fabulous cut flower. It's also really good plant TV because it's just covered in pollinators all the time. Just plunk the lawn chair out there and just watch it in the morning with a cup of coffee. It's one of my poor long-suffering husband's favorites. And the only heads up with this one is that it comes from a little corm, has a corm sort of root system to it. And so the voles may also dine on it. So I tend to end up replacing it every few years because sooner, between the chipmunks, the bunnies, the voles, and the squirrels, it tends to reduce in size. So of our monardas, of our native monardas, Bradburyana is short, cute, and stays put. So we have a bigger one that also will try to eat your yard. And so this is not that one. It's a lovely kind of lavender fireworks of flowers. And then it also turns burgundy in the fall. So lots to love, and a shorter monarda at about 12 to 14 inches. And also in the mint family. And so all of the plant parts are edible. And if you're feeling very elegant, you can float it in your punch bowl at the garden party. However, it's also quite lovely in that glass of lemonade. So, but this one is, because we have that wonderful tubular flower on it, it is a hummingbird magnet. And they will find you and they will stop by every day and check. Mine stops by at 5 o'clock, almost on the dot. So, penstemon. Digitalis, we've got, again, several species of penstemon that are native. This one is kind of that mid-level, wet to dry sort of penstemon. And you'll find the cultivars of this with purple foliage. So things like Husker's Red or Dark Towers are gonna have, there's some genetics in there that they'll be more purple. This is also a hummingbird magnet. They will find you and they will stop by regularly. When I was working in garden centers, we'd have it out on the bench. Clockwork, that hummingbird would hit that penstemon first and then take a cruise around the rest to see what else was good. But evidently this was the clear favorite. And it's, again, a great cut flower. Give it a good shake though, because otherwise critters will come with you into the house. It does tend to turn red in the fall too. Because let's face it, we all love the bright yellow daisy flower of black-eyed Susans. This one is one of our more wet-tolerant black-eyed Susans. It's also a bit shorter and a bit better behaved. So there's lots to love about something that just blooms for 4 months, right? And then it's also host to silvery checker spot butterflies and a few moth species. And so when we're looking at, when you say larval host, this means that you're gonna expect to see some holes in the leaves. And that's okay, because it's feeding somebody. And we want more caterpillars because caterpillars are baby bird food, right? And so I don't know if you've noticed, but the robins are building nests right now. And so there's, I'm very popular. I planted the yard for wildlife, so the wildlife shows up. So I had cedar waxwings today. It was very exciting. All right, we're going to the sunny, wet bottom, the swampy bit in the bright sunlight. Swamp milkweed is also I find very much well-behaved for a milkweed. And it's a kind of a hotter, darker pink in the flower. But heads up, the rabbits find it delicious. So keep that in mind. But it's also going to just kind of do a little clump. It's not going to take over the whole yard. Carex vulpinoides, so fox sedge is one of our wet-loving sedges. We have about 300 to 400 species of native sedges. It's telling them apart is a nightmare. So, but this one, because it has the seed heads look like foxtails, so it's called fox sedge, and it gives you a nice grassy clumping form, and that we can blend in with things that are a little bit more chunky in their texture. And so if you've got a sunny, wet spot, you deserve Queen of the Prairie. Because Queen of the Prairie she's a big plant, but she's got cotton candy flowers the size of your head. And who doesn't love a big fluffy pink flower in June? And the rabbits don't eat it. So yeah. And then it turns red in the fall. So there's lots to love. It's a big, blowsy plant, but super fun. So why not, right? Our hibiscus. So we have 2 native species of hibiscus. And one is more pink and one is more white, and I can't remember the difference off the top of my head. This is the genetics for those big dinner plate size hibiscus that you see at the garden center. And if you love the big cultivars that come in all the shades of pink and white, Lincoln Park Zoo is the only accredited perennial hibiscus collection in the country. And they've got 75 kinds. So head to the zoo in July, because animals are cool, but big flowers, man. So this is a plant, in nature, you're gonna find it growing at the edge of the pond. So you might see out of the forest preserve, you might find them at the edge of the pond. The other things to think about with hibiscus is it is a hibiscus, so it wants to be warm before it's gonna show up. Now we've been pretty warm this year, so it may actually turn up by Memorial Day, but it can be as late as June, and that one, you have to remember where you put it. So, and then it'll get going real quick. But it's a real fun tropical flower, and it's still a native plant for us. So this is one of my non-natives because I freely admit to being a bit of an iris collector, and if I'm gonna have a sunny, wet spot, I'm gonna have some water iris because they're just so fun. And so Japanese iris is a water lover, and they bloom more in July. So if you love iris, this gives you another variety to plant and explore. So that cardinal flower, that red flower that we saw earlier, is Lobelia cardinalis. It's one of our few true red native plants, and it's also a butterfly and hummingbird magnet. The bumblebees like it as well, but you can kind of see it's got sort of a tubular sort of flower to it. And so what bumblebees do, and they do this on a lot of our tubular flowers, I don't know if they have an agenda, they have just too much to do. So they like to come in from the side and slit the corolla of the flower and take the nectar from the side, ignoring their job as pollinator, get the pollen on your head and right? That's how we do this. No, we sneak in from the side for the sugar. It's a behavior called nectar robbing, and I call it cheating. So this gives you an excuse to go spend time in the garden because bees are up to stuff. So some more illustrations before we head to the shade. I'm rather fond of the glass balls I just think they're fun, right? Because gardens should be fun, and they should reflect your personality. And so for shade, right? So this is half a day of sun or less. The Carex pennsylvanica is actually a full sun to full shade plant. And I have been running some sedge experiments, kind of putting them in different corners of the yard and let's see what they do. This is winning the prize for bloody-minded toughness in a dry shade, which is the hardest place to plant anything. And so you can kind of see that pen sedge likes to fill in as a little low, soft, grassy ground cover. Very durable. And with our sedges, they're a spring plant, so they tend to flower. Right, they're finishing up flowering right now, and then they're going to put their full growth on in May. So unlike some of our ornamental grasses that don't get started until like June. So this is an early season plant for us. Cordalis lutea, this is not a native plant, but it's darn cute. And it blooms from June until October. Actually, it's blooming now. So, because we've been warm. It's a delicate little plant. It will reseed, but it's easy. It takes a minute, like not even a second to pull out, because it's very deceptively kind of delicate, but it gives you a nice frothy little plant for the shade that just blooms constantly. Coral bells. And so, because there's thousands of them, and they're just so much fun. But there's all kinds of different colors in coral bells. Read the tags, because some are going to be more part shade, full shade. Some are more part sun, full sun. So there's kind of little degrees of shade in the coral bell family. I also find, for those of us with heavy clay soils, a little scoop of compost, because they arise from a basal structure and they can rot really easily. So that's why we're here on the upland kind of drier side list. So I find a little bit of compost just to give a little bit of airspace around that basal structure can make a big difference in if your heuchera melts out like mine tends to do. So, starting to flower right now, actually, is Solomon seal. And so there's a bunch of different ones out there. I want them all because I love them very much. This is one of my favorite plants for sheer indestructibility. The rabbits don't eat them. I can't promise on the deer, but the bunnies don't eat it. It spreads by kind of a tuberous root system, very shallow, and it gives you an arching texture in the garden. The first hummingbirds the ones that are already here, crazy things, will stop by because it has a nice little bell-like flower and lots of nectar, so you'll get lots of bees in it too. And that will get a little blueberry that gets eaten almost instantly. So, but dry, I have mostly dry shade, so this one keeps coming back. So, for one of our dry shade fern options is Christmas fern. You'll find this growing natively on Starved Rock on the bluffs, for example. It tends to be a little bit of a rounder, flatter fern with a shiny, dark foliage to it, and it keeps those leaves into January, which is why it was used as Christmas decoration. You cut some branches for Christmas. And so, but it's a slow-moving, kind of very easygoing fern that's very drought tolerant. And so, last but not least on our list, Tiarella. This is, it might be starting to bloom right about where we've had all these 80-degree weather, so things are going fast. But this one is similar in leaf a bit to that heuchera, where it's got a kind of a palmate leaf to it, but a real tiny, frothy, starry flower cluster. There's a bunch of different cultivars out. And if it's really happy, it might be a bit of a ground cover for you. But it's another nice edge of the border, front short plant. So, okay, medium moisture, wet to dry, lady fern. Is one of our classic ferns. It tends to have a darker stem, so you might see some cultivars that take advantage of that. One is lady in red. They've got a red mid stem, but it gives us that lovely ferny texture in the garden. And really appreciates kind of that mid-range of soils. Not too dry, not underwater. Shooting star is almost blooming. It's thinking, so this is a spring ephemeral, but they're just too cute not to put in the talk. So they come up like, they look like little bunches of lettuce when they first come out of the ground. And this one tends to bloom April-ish, April, May-ish, somewhere in there. And it's another early food source for bumblebees, because queen bumblebees go to it for pollen because it doesn't offer nectar. And the most fun thing is they have to shake the flower to get the pollen out. And so you've got big fat queen bumblebees shimmying in the garden. Don't we need more shimmying bees? Tell you, bees are up to stuff. Japanese forest grass, obviously not a native plant. But it's got a lovely, soft, cascading habit to it, which is why we love Japanese forest grass. Hakanakloa, I had to practice, so you have to listen. So to me, try not to butcher the name. No, but Hakanakloa is a moisture-loving, shady grass. And there's some other cultivars that are yellow. There's actually some that a little bit of red in them now, but it gives you that beautiful, soft, cascading look, which can be nice if you're dealing with a lot of bigger textures of the, something that's not a hosta, right? So, Ligularia, our leopard plant. This happens to be a cultivar called the Rocket, but there's a bunch of other ones out there too. Some of them are more purple. And Ligularia is a water lover, and it will tell you if it's too hot because it wilts. It's very much a drama queen. I know where there's a patch of it at Morton Arboretum that's on the west side, so it gets the hot afternoon sun, wilts like clockwork, pops right back up as soon as the sun goes over the tree. Yeah, don't believe it till it gets back in the shade. But it gives, again, a really nice kind of plasticky big texture that kind of, it can be really quite lovely with that Japanese forest grass. And then, I have sun, I meant shade. So Virginia bluebells, blooming right now, right? And so if you have a chance to get out to the forest preserves, there's some wonderful spots that are just carpeted with bluebells. You deserve it. It was a long winter. So this is, again, is a spring ephemeral like the dodecathion, so they're going to fade in the heat of summer, so interplant them with other things. But I think we all deserve a little spring magic in the form of a bluebell. And again, it's one of those where anything with a long tongue is gonna stop by, and the bumblebees will slice it from the side because, again, cheaters. Woodland phlox is starting to flower. And woodland phlox is beautifully fragrant. It's not super tall. We're in the 12 to 18 inch range. And this is a perennial forest, but it's just a gorgeous fragrance in the early spring and lots of lavender. So it's kind of also host to a couple of moths. But again, with a tubular flower and lots of nectar, you're gonna get a lot of bee action on it too. All right, bottom wet, shady corner. Things that stay consistent, that need consistent moisture, wild ginger. And I'm very fond of wild ginger because I like that velvetyness of the texture. It also has a weird little flower. You have to lift the leaves, get down on your hands and knees and lift the skirts. But then it has a seed structure called an oleosome, which is also known as ant candy, because it's a sugary, fatty coating. And so it's designed, the plant has evolved to be attractive to ants. So the ants take the seed back home, sugar up the children, and leave it behind. The kids eat all the sugar off of it and leave the seed behind. And so if you have wild ginger, you often have some random bits show up because the ants have planted it for you. So, but this one is not browsed by deer or rabbits and tends to actually have some allelopathic properties, so it's really good weed control. Burr sedge, because I love the Sputnik flowers. They're cool and a little bit weird, and they're really fun in arrangements. But like all of our sedges, they are host to some butterflies and moths, but our our songbirds will eat the seeds too. So it's a good little critter, it's a good critter plant. Sensitive fern is up at the Botanic Garden right now. I was just teaching a class this past weekend, and they're starting to come up and unfurl. Sensitive plant is a water-loving fern. This one is a wetland fern, and so it's happiest where it gets consistent moisture, and it's got a much different texture in it. And for me, I think it's a little bit Jurassic. We're a little, put a little a plastic T-Rex in there. He'll be happy at home. But they are a much different, beefier texture than your regular fern, than your other ferns. Speaking of other ferns, cinnamon fern, because it has those fertile flowers look like cinnamon sticks. But it's got that kind of classic shuttlecock form, so it's a lot different than something like sensitive fern tends to slowly sort of layer over each other. It's not a super organized structure. Whereas if you are looking for a more formal look, then cinnamon fern can be a good candidate, but also very much a water lover, and unusual in ferns, a larval host to a couple of moths. Most of our ferns aren't a larval host to anything, so cinnamon fern can be a fun one. Regerzia, for that big, it's got like dinner plate sized leaves, and then the flowers are lightly fragrant, and those leaves turn red in the fall. So it's got a nice big texture to it, so it plays well with ferns and other softer things. And so blooms in June and July. And just a fun, also a little bit Jurassic in its kind of look and feel. So, and our Tradescantia, this is one of our native spiderworts. We've got a couple. This one is, so with Tradescantia, each flower only opens for a day, but it's probably gonna have a bumblebee on it because the bees think this is awesome. The caveat with this one, if it's really happy, it's going to reseed. And if you don't want it to reseed, give it a whack back when it's pretty much done flowering, and then it'll fluff, it'll send out new leaves, and you might get a little bit of rebloom. But I just like it as a grassy texture that's a little different with with a Regerzia or something that's going to be bigger and beefier. And it's just a neat flower. It's just fun. So, a few last inspiration. This is the rain garden here with the ferns. And so instead of we're going to have to fill, and we just took advantage of that wet area. So we'll just build a path over it and plant it with ferns and birch trees. So you have a garden space instead of trying to mow it. So a few highlight reels on wet tolerant trees. American hornbeam, the Carpinus caroliniana, is it goes full sun to full shade and wet to dry. So this is a tree you can put pretty much anywhere. It does want to be 25 to 30 feet high and wide, but there are a number of cultivars on the marketplace that are a bit narrower or more teardrop shaped, and those seed pods are probably about 3 inches long, and they shatter and disappear. They're not messy, but they look like little chandeliers. And so that's the bark. And the fall color is pretty darn glorious. So if you need a really durable, tough tree, this can be a good selection. Our swamp white oak, and this is our most wet tolerant oak. It will cheerfully kind of live in the swampy bit. And it's fast growing. The more water you give it, the faster it grows. So we're looking at least 3 feet a year in a swamp white oak. You'll see them more planted in parks and municipalities because folks have figured out this is a really adaptable oak tree. And it has a bit of a flaky bark to it. And it's Quercus bicolor because it has the pale underside on the leaf. It is one of our oaks that's very marcescent. That's your vocabulary word for the night, which means it's a deciduous plant that holds its leaves through the winter. And so this can be a plus when you don't want to see the neighbor's trampoline, but it can be a minus if you're waiting for it to drop all its leaves because it won't do it until like April. So It depends on your leaf tolerances. Bald cypress, which is that cypress that grows in the swamps. And so this one will grow underwater, and then it forms weird little knees. It's one of our deciduous conifers because it likes to freak us out by turning this lovely kind of orangey, bronzy color in the fall and dropping its needles. And then we get calls in the plant clinic at the Arboretum, my tree is dying. No, it's just messing with you. So, but it has that beautiful kind of flaky, interesting bark, kind of goofy looking little cones, and also a really fast grower. So if you have that true swampy, never dries out ever, this is the tree that will grow there. So, and live its best life. A few wet tolerant shrubs to wrap us up. Buttonbush is an edge of the pond sort of shrub. There's also a bunch of cultivars that are smaller and more tidy in its habit. All by the species by itself is kind of a loose, sort of a little all over the place. But it has wonderful fragrant white flowers in June that the critters really like. And it's really, so for a non-native option, and there's a bunch of these out there in Clethra, so summer sweet, you can find them at 3 feet, you can find them up to 5. They come in white and they come in pink. They're beautifully fragrant, they smell like vanilla, and they bloom in July. This is a full sun to full shade plant, so it's really adaptable light-wise. And again, it's kind of nice underneath the dining room window, so you get that fragrance in the summer. So you deserve things that smell nice in the yard too. Lindera, so our spice bush is just finishing up blooming. It tends to bloom in March. And all of the plant parts are fragrant. And so even in mid-season, if you break a leaf off and you rub it, you kind of dab it behind your ear so that you smell nice. But it's also a larval host spice bush swallowtail butterflies, which is a big black swallowtail butterfly with a metallic blue hindwing. Because don't we all deserve more butterflies? I think we do. So this can be a nice replacement for viburnum, because some of us have issues with viburnum leaf beetle. And check your viburnums if you do, because the leaf beetles are starting to come out. It has a nice golden fall color. So very happy, right? It's kind of a good half a day of sun. So thank you for all of your very kind attention. Do we have any questions? Yes.
Basic one, but so when you're deciding how much shade you have, what time of year are you deciding that?
When I'm deciding how much shade I have, what time of year? Start in like May and June, when the leaves of the trees are mostly leafed out, which tends to be like Memorial Day. So this is an excuse to sit out there on Memorial Day and watch the sun move across the sky with a beverage of your choice. And there are little apps and there are little like light meters that you can get on Amazon if you don't have the time. But it does give you an excuse to watch your sun patterns. So starting in like late May, early June. And so here, I'll put that down. So full sun is 6 hours or more of direct sun. Like at least 6, 8 if you can swing it. Part shade is that 4 to 6 hour range, so like a half a day. And then full shade is 4 hours or less. And so when you're reading descriptions or reading plant tags, those are the sort of agreed upon definitions. So 6 or more full sun, 4 to 6 part shade, 4 or less full shade. And then the other thing to pay attention to is what's casting the shade. Because honey locust is very soft and filmy. Norway maple, it's a closet. Yeah, it's dark. It's dark under there. It's dark and it's dry. Yeah, because the maple roots are so fine, they win. So dry shade. So when you go to the garden center, go, I need dry shade. And they will pat you on the head and say, I'm sorry, and then give you some options. So It's probably the hardest situation to plant in, trust me. So, any other questions? Lady in the back.
Presentation be sent to us as well?
We can. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff in it, I know. So, Catherine, remind me and I will send it to you. Yeah, so, and then you had a question.
Does there have to be exit for the water?
Sure. The question is, does there have to be an exit for the water for the rain garden? No, there doesn't have to be. However, check your ordinances, because sometimes they'll throw that in there. But again, this is just designed to hold and let it percolate back down. That's our goal, is kind of hold that water in place and let it just seep in. So my rain garden doesn't have an exit. Yeah, so, and I'm not sure, so I think these are some in, I want to say it's Burlington, Wisconsin, but yeah, it depends on the situation. There's a lot of factors in play when you're placing it, but it doesn't have to have an exit. Yeah. Any other questions? The lady in the back.
Lake that forms, like there's.
Oh my.
And so with all the rain that we've had, it literally becomes like a lake. So it's not really a rain garden.
Yep.
Suggestions?
For the 6 houses that form a lake in the backyard when it rains. Well, number 1, talk to the village. Number 2, when the village blows you off. No, when the village says, I'm sorry, we have no money. And how long does that water sit there? Days, hours, days? So I would be, unless you pump it out. Well, that's fun.
So I mean, I have a big garden back there that I planted with Coreopsis palmera, which
Yep, palmera, yep.
and they lost it there.
Good, yeah.
And I now know why the coneflower don't seem to be.
Yeah, the coneflower will not be happy. They don't like to swim. Anything on that wet list will live its best life. So I might say sometimes starting with some sedges, just to give you still have that grassy look to it. But yeah, anything on that wet list will be awesome there. And if you've got room for a tree, a bald cypress will live its very best life. But yeah, I would start looking at things. So, but I don't want to say wetland, like true water plants, because it's going to dry out eventually. Right. So we need something that can handle inundation. We're looking for floodplain plants. Yeah. So yeah, anything on that bottom list should do awesome for you. Yeah. Yes.
So the village did hump this out a number of years ago and put in a rain garden with the drain in the center. Mm-hmm. And the soil around it is all kind of, but a loose material.
Okay.
The plants they put in were probably good. So is that considered dry?
So the question is that the village helped you out and put a rain garden in, but they put a drain in the center so the water has somewhere to go. Yeah. So it goes, but it sits there for a bit and then hits the drain. And so the soil has now gotten a little more rockier and drier.
Well, it's not dirt per se. It's more sandy stuff so that the water can drain.
Okay. Okay.
As well.
Well, and the plants survive 5 years, and hey, that's pretty good. So a lot of our native plants will also wander around, and not everything lives forever. So like echinacea coneflowers, that plant, the individual plant lives about 3 to 5 years. It just reseeds a lot. So I would say look at that middle layer, that kind of mid-range plant list. Yeah, not the super dry, not the super wet, the stuff in the middle that's more adaptable. And the easiest test for drainage is to dig a 1 foot by 1 foot hole, fill it with water, and see what it does. This also gives you an excuse to dig holes for science. Because we want to see how fast is that water draining. If it takes like minutes, then we're really dry. right? If it takes 2 days, then we're okay. That's a higher clay volume, because it's kind of hard to tell just by looking at it sometimes. And I think we're supposed to get more thunderstorms on Thursday, Friday. And because the easiest soil test when it's wet is take a handful and squeeze it. What's it do? So the more sticky it is, the higher the clay content. And that kind of helps us inform us on where we need to go plant-wise. So does that help a little bit? I know it's hard to do, it's hard to say without, and there's always more options than the list that I've given you too. So, so I do a little investigative work on what that soil really, how well that soil's really draining, and that's going to inform you which direction to head in a plant choice. That make sense? Okay, cool. Any other questions? Yes.
I have a garden, and I'm thinking of the rain garden, but you said it can draw plants or bugs that, I mean, should be a certain distance from the vegetable garden to the rain garden, so they don't jump to my vegetable garden?
So, not necessarily, because a lot of what we're putting in a rain garden is our pollinator plants, which means they're going to attract pollinators, which means you should get a better tomato crop. Because the bees are not picky, they're not like, oh, they're, equal opportunity pollinators. And so a lot of times native plants around the vegetable garden gives you a better harvest. And it does some pest control.
I was gonna say,
Your mom, yeah.
foundation of the house,
Oh, nice.
kept all our ants out.
Yeah.
I mean, is something like, are there certain plants maybe I should plant?
There is there's
I'll get some caterpillars and.
right.
So,
And so so like tomato hornworm caterpillars, the huge green ones, if they have little white capsules on their back, then they've been hit by a parasitoid wasp, and that is a dead caterpillar walking, because the eggs will hatch and eat the caterpillar from the inside out. So we want and that wasp is very tiny. You will probably never see it. But it's like, this is, yeah. So there's a whole, don't get me started on the wasps because they're so dang cool. So a lot of these things are bringing beneficial predators that are going to do some of the work for you. There's a wonderful book by Jessica Walliser, W-A-L, I'll let you get a pen. You may have it in the library, on companion planting. And it's W-A-L-L-I-S-E-R, first name Jessica. And I'm not going to remember the exact title of it, but I know Catherine will be able to help you out. And she has a terrific book on science-based companion planting. So things that, because there's also a set of old wives' tales that don't always prove to be true. And so these are things that we've tested and it actually works. So that may come in handy for you. Any other questions? One lady in the back.
What would be your recommendation for wet shade ground cover?
Recommendation for a wet shade ground cover. Well, first choice would be that ginger. They are an edge of the stream kind of plant. They like it. And so I've gotten ginger to grow because I put a bird bath in the middle of it. And that would be my first choice. That's tricky. So, okay. And then I would start, I'd also look at the sedges, because something like a pen sedge, that Carex pennsylvanica, it only gets this tall, maybe 6 inches, and it's very flowy. And so that'll do awesome back there. It's going to spread by rhizomes. It's fairly steady. It's not overnight, but it's fairly steady. So I would say, because usually you can get Pennsylvania sedge in plugs, and like 1 every 6 inches. By 2 years, it'll mostly fill in. Yeah. Especially if it's got extra water. The more water it has, the faster it goes. So, so pen sedge is one option. There's a bunch of different short sedges that will be just fine for it. Yeah. And it'll give you a little more grassiness look, but it's not mud. So, yeah. All right. Any other questions? Okay, great. Thank you guys so much. It was really fun.